What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Book Binge this week for episode 58, right? Yeah, that's how numbers work. Sorry, I've had a really long weekend, so when I'm recording this, I just looked at the number of 58, which is like, what number is even that? This week, we are going over my January reading wrap-up and February TBR. January started off strong for me, really strong, actually, until I fell off severely about halfway through the month when school started for my last semester. Thank goodness it is my last semester. Um, and some other projects and whatnot that I've been doing, including working on some writing stuff in the back half of the month and doing some other stuff for my old school that cut into reading time quite a bit and also put me into a small slump for a couple weeks. Boy, have I been a mess the last couple weeks, but let's start off just as normal with last month's read. I started the month and got through in less than 2 weeks, I believe. Actually, one second, let me grab something else because I forgot. I read Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2 at the very beginning of this month. I actually just remembered that at the moment. I had forgotten to put that in my notes. That was supposed to be something that I read at the end of December, but didn't. So the first few days of January were actually on Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2, which I did enjoy a bit. It might be, it's on the same level as Queen Amid Ashes for me, as probably amongst my least favorite of the Sun Eater works altogether, but there were still a few good stories in the collection. As you know, Rockio is an incredible writer, so anything that he works on is going to be at least good. At least I don't foresee him dropping anything that isn't good in the near future based off of everything that I've read up to this point, but I did enjoy that. That was the very first thing that I got started with in January. I'm just going to stick this over here now, but after I finished reading Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2, I did read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which was my monthly classic for January by Jules Verne. This was a book that, as I mentioned last month and in a few other videos where this book has been in the topic, including some of my bi-weekly updates if you want to check those out as well. So you're getting a bit more of a scoop on what's going on with the channel at any given point in time. I started reading this book in 8th grade, actually. I read it over the last semester of that grade, but I only read the first half of the book. By the time I got to the second half of the book, the school year was ending, and I was actually needing to turn it in. My librarian did tell me that I could keep it for the summer and finish reading it, and then just return it at the start of the next year, but I decided that I'd be, better off, safer off, returning it anyway, and I heavily regret not finishing it. I've always regretted not finishing it because I was enjoying it so much at the time, and now that I did read the full thing, I even more so regret not having finished it back then, primarily because the second half is a lot better than the first half. I mean, the first several chapters are amazing. They set up things really well, and once the atmosphere of being under the sea, I guess I'll say, is amazing, but the back half has a lot of stuff in it that I personally absolutely adored. I really enjoyed this book, had an amazing time with it. Now, some other things that I got to in January. I started my journey working through the complete tales and poems of Edgar Allan Poe. Sorry, I just had to grab the book from the bottom of my stack here with the Barnes & Noble leatherbound edition, which is quite beautiful. Last month, when I talked about my TBR for the month, I said that I would probably start reading a couple poems, a couple short stories by Poe, and a couple short stories by H.P. Lovecraft. I'm deciding that I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'm actually going to work through all of the poems in this collection first, and then when it comes to the actual short stories by Poe and or Lovecraft, I'll decide what I'm going to do with those once I get to them. But I did read, if I'm counting correctly, I believe 5 of the poems at the very beginning of this collection, all except for one of which were a hit for me. Those poems were O Tempora O Mores, To Margaret, To Octavia, Tamerlane, Song, and Dream. So I forgot to put Tamerlane on my list in my notes. So that was actually 6 poems, not 5, 6 poems. It's funny that I forgot to put Tamerlane when that one had so much thought-provoking stuff, and it was by far the longest of all the poems that I read. might be the longest poem in the collection. Um, no, it's not the longest poem in the collection. It almost is, but either way, I read those 6 poems, and To Margaret didn't really do anything for me based on what it was trying to do, but To Octavia, despite being short, was one that I really enjoyed. O Tempora O Mores had a few stanzas that I found to be really thought-provoking. Similar thing with Song and Dreams, which I enjoyed both of those, but both of those two I actually had to read several times before I had a grasp of what I was personally interpreting for them to mean or to be. And then Tamerlane, which is about Timur. Timur, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that at all, which I actually learned recently that that's what that is about. It's a poetic recounting as that person telling their life story and regrets within the poem. It's about 7 pages. It was really good. There were several stanzas in it that I just thought were incredibly beautiful and eloquent. Just reading all of Poe's poetry up to this point has just been a joy for me. I've enjoyed all of them except for that one, which was, even in terms of how it was, structured and worded and whatnot, and the style that Poe chose to go with it, was quite different than anything else in the collection up to this point. But I've really enjoyed my time with the poems. Outside of starting the poems, I did start another big chunky work. That was The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. And this one I started. I got about 200 pages in. In fact, after I finished, or I was actually starting to read it alongside 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I believe. But especially after I finished 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I binged about 100 or so pages of this. I got, no outright spoilers. I'm just going to say I got through to the end of the prison segment. That's all I'm going to say about it. I really enjoyed everything that I read in this so far. I've absolutely adored it, to be honest. It's been incredible, but I did put it on pause so that I could get through Kingdoms of Death over the course of the rest of the month. However, turned out that that didn't really matter, my efforts to do that in the first place anyway, because as you'll see on camera, actually, I'm surprised that I can see it from that angle. I have my bookmark about halfway through. I got about 220 pages into Kingdoms of Death before school and other stuff going on caused me to my reading time to drop down by like 80%, and then even the 20% of time that I had to be able to read over the last couple weeks, especially just I wasn't into it for whatever reason, like whenever you have like a moment every other day, to be able to read when you're normally used to reading for an hour or two every day, your brain is just kind of like, well, I don't really feel like reading. I'm just going to do something else for the moment until I can actually like read and focus on it for a while. So that's what ended up happening over the last couple days. I'm recording this in February, so saying over the last couple days, I did get a little bit further. Technically doesn't count for the January reading, but doesn't really matter. The book was really starting to get good when I had to stop it, but I'm enjoying it nonetheless. In terms of my book of the month, well, I think the only book that I can really justify putting on the book of the month is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, because it's the only book that I finished. I did do Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 2, like I said, but I enjoyed this more than that, and I did not finish, Kingdoms of Death or Count of Monte Cristo over the course of the month. So this by default is kind of the book of the month, but it was genuinely really good. If, I had the opportunity, well, I did have a little bit of opportunity, but I would not have been able to finish Kingdoms of Death in January, even if I did choose to read in the opportunities that I had. If I did have the time, I guess, plus the opportunity to be able to finish Kingdoms of Death in January like I was hoping, who knows whether it would have been able to beat it or not. I guess we'll see when I talk about my reading wrap-up and TBR next month. But just to be clear again, if the first 200 pages of The Count of Monte Cristo actually counted as an individual book, even that material was good enough that I think that could have been my book of the month. It's really, really, really good stuff. Now, this month's reads, I'm going to be a little bit more reserved on it than I think I typically would be, just because of how January went and how I'm predicting February to go, because I'm going to be continuing to do some of that other stuff for my old school, drumming for the choir for a project, taking up a lot of time and energy for that, as well as continuing to be doing a lot of schoolwork and whatnot this month. I'm going to finish Kingdoms of Death. If absolutely nothing else, that is going to be my primary project for February, is finishing this book. Because I was supposed to finish it last month, so I'm actually severely behind on my own read along as a result, which is kind of annoying, but sometimes things just go a little bit not how we expect them to. But that will be the first thing that I try to get through in February. And then, because it is my read along, I am also going to work on Ashes of Man immediately afterwards. Uh, I feel like I'm very likely to start Ashes of Man the second that I finish Kingdoms of Death, just so that I can guarantee myself the time and opportunity to be able to finish it. And I think for the first time since Empire of Silence, I think I'm actually going to read Ashes of Man out of my UK edition rather than the US edition, because the pages are so smooth and easy to work with in this edition, whereas in most of my other UK editions, the way that they're bound makes them not exactly the most comfortable to read from. This one's different, so I might actually read from this edition rather than the US edition this month. But either way, yeah, that is going to be the other project for this month. And of course, with the monthly classics going on, I will be including one other book that I actually cannot show off in the video right now because it did not deliver. It has not arrived at my home in time. It got delayed in shipment. That being The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, a really short book. I might decide to fit that in between Kingdoms of Death and Ashes of Man just because it is so short. But yeah, like I said, my copy of that did not actually arrive in time for me to be able to show it off in this video. Either way, I'm not going to hold my breath for being able to work on anything more. If I feel like I need something a little bit different for a little temporary break in my reading, I might pick up another one or two poems here and there in this, just because they're so short and they really work my brain in a different way than all of my other books do, so they just feel a little bit different. I might do that, and of course, I would love to be able to continue the Count of Monte Cristo, but like I said, I'm not going to hold my breath on being able to do that. I don't expect to be able to have very much reading time this month. I might be able to get back into it in March, but as you'll see later this month, I have some plans for March that may or may not allow me or afford me the chance to do so, but at this point in time, I'm mostly just playing a lot of this by ear either way. And that is the wrap up and the TBR for this month. Thank you guys for watching. I really hope February goes a lot better for me on the reading front than January did, and even just in terms of my busyness, but I don't know if that will change very much this month, but one can hope. Hopefully by the end of this month, I'll be able to have a little bit more time after finishing one of my college courses. That's a condensed one. That will allow me to be able to get ahead on some reading and whatnot before the next one of these wrap-ups. But we will see what happens when I'm able to work on that stuff and what kind of time I am afforded for it based off of work and, like I said, all of that other stuff going on. If you want more details on projects that I have coming up, projects that I've recently worked on, you can obviously check out my State of Affairs video that will be coming out tomorrow. That was supposed to come out last Friday, but I was so busy that I couldn't do that. So it will be coming out tomorrow. And of course, my Fortnite on the Isle, where my bi-weekly updates, where I talk about a little bit more in detail of the stuff that I'm actively doing and stuff that's going to be coming out. One of those just came out this past Sunday, a couple days ago, so you can check that out as well, so that you can get the scoop on some of the stuff that I was working on over the last couple weeks, and the stuff that was going on in my life over the last couple weeks that caused for this wrap-up to be a little bit a little bit more chaotic, I guess, in a sense, than normal. Either way, thank you guys again for watching. I'll be back again tomorrow with that state of affairs for you.